On Tuesday night, Germany's Chancellor-in-Waiting, Friedrich Merz, announced that his Christian Democrat Party and their prospective coalition partners, the SPD, plan to introduce a motion to the Bundestag that will create an unprecedented €500 billion fund to invest in the German public sector and exempt most defence spending from the so-called debt brake, paving the way for a massive rearmament. Now, it's hard to overstate quite how massive this is. Not only would it turn Germany into a military superpower, but it's also a radical departure from the Christian Democrats' long-standing aversion to debt that could, if done right, reinvigorate Germany's stagnant economy. So in this video, we're going to take a look at this new package and how it could transform both Germany and Europe. We're getting remarkably close to 1 million subscribers, and currently 72% of you haven't yet subscribed. So lend us a hand and subscribe today. So there are basically two elements to this package. The first is a €500 billion off-budget fund to boost Germany's public investment, especially in stuff like infrastructure over the next 10 years. For context, the German government sometimes sets up off-budget funds for specific projects, like the green transition or the pandemic recovery, to get around the so-called debt brake, which basically limits how much the federal government can borrow and prevents Germany's state governments from borrowing anything at all. These funds have become particularly popular over the past few years, but this €500 billion fund would be the biggest ever, and by quite some margin. Merz has also said that he would amend the debt brake to allow state governments to run deficits representing 0.35% of GDP in order to increase public investment at the state level. This all speaks to the severity of Germany's underinvestment in public services, because while private sector investment is pretty high in Germany, public sector investment has long lagged way behind the European average, and today its infrastructure, stuff like roads, public transport and internet, is all in dire need of repair. This probably plays a role in Germany's lackluster productivity. After all, it's hard to get work done when the roads don't work and you've got to use a fax machine. Anyway, in the best case scenario, this increased spending will make German manufacturers more competitive, which is one of the reasons that German exports have declined over the past few years, as well as stimulating domestic demand in Germany, which hasn't recovered since the pandemic. Weak domestic demand has also been terrible news for the German economy because it's exacerbated the economy's reliance on exports, and America's economic outperformance post-pandemic suggests that massive stimulus spending, which is what the Biden administration went for in 2021, while Germany and others leaned into austerity, is the best way to revive it. Anyway, the second part of the package is a plan to exempt defense spending above 1% of GDP from the debt brake, allowing Germany to raise an unlimited amount of debt to fund its armed forces and provide military assistance to Ukraine. This comes on top of the €100 billion special fund set up by Scholz after Putin's invasion of Ukraine, of which something like 80% has been spent so far, and will probably pave the way to tens of billions of euros of further military spending. If Germany increases its defence spending to 3% of GDP, for instance, 2% of that, representing roughly €80 billion, will be exempt from the debt brake, and therefore could be funded via borrowing. Now, as you might have noticed, the big obstacle to Merz's plan is the debt brake. For context, the debt brake is a constitutional amendment passed by Angela Merkel in 2009 that prevents the German government from running a deficit larger than 0.35% of GDP, and bans German state governments from borrowing at all. And this is pretty strict. For context, most big European countries currently run deficits between 2 and 3% of GDP, and the debt brake is probably the main reason that Germany hasn't really invested in either its military or public infrastructure over the past decade or so. More and more, German politicians are coming out in favour of scrapping, or at least reforming, the debt brake in recent years, in order to give Germany the fiscal space to deal with the various crises afflicting Europe. And even Merz has said that he's open to at least reforming it during his campaign, although he didn't suggest that he would do anything quite this dramatic. Anyway, because it's a constitutional amendment, reforming the debt brake, which Merz will need to do to get this package through, will require a 2/3 majority in Germany's parliament, the Bundestag. Now, this looked like it was going to be difficult or nearly impossible, because at last month's election, the AfD and the Left Party, who both signalled that they would oppose more borrowing to support Ukraine, collectively won more than a third of seats, and could therefore block any constitutional amendment. However, the new Bundestag only takes their seats at the end of March, and the old parliament, where the AfD and Left play less of a role, is still sitting until then. So Merz has apparently decided to rush this constitutional amendment through next week before the next Bundestag takes its seats, presumably with additional support from the Greens in order to meet the 2/3 threshold. Now, there are definitely political and economic risks to this plan. Politically, it's a risk because it looks slightly undemocratic for Merz to rush through these reforms before the newly elected Bundestag takes its seats, especially given that he didn't explicitly campaign for it. Although Merz would argue that the extraordinary events of the past few weeks have forced this urgent reaction. Economically, it's also a risk because, well, more debt obviously comes with more risks. Just announcing the package has triggered the biggest sell-off in German government debt since the fall of the Berlin Wall, and a steep increase in German borrowing costs. Skeptics will fret that this is the first step towards Germany becoming, if not Italy, then maybe France or the UK, who are both currently struggling to deal with their massive debt burdens. However, recent history suggests that government borrowing and spending is a better solution to Germany's economic crisis than another round of austerity, especially considering that Germany currently has a very manageable debt burden by international standards. Finally though, Merz might also be helped by the economic chaos across the pond. As Trump's erratic policymaking undercuts confidence and a recession looms in the US, investors have started to look for safe, non-American assets. If Merz can convince investors that Germany's economic fundamentals are still strong, German bonds could emerge as a favoured safe asset, and issuing more bonds might actually help this process. After all, one of the reasons American bonds have long been the safe asset of choice is because there's so many of them, which means that there's always a liquid market to buy and sell. So if Germany issues enough bonds, they could partially replace US bonds in this respect, which could go some way to meeting Merz's ambitions. If you didn't know, Too Long is our regular physical magazine, with our next issue diving deep into the people who control our world, the 25 most influential people as rated by the TLDR team and you. The next edition contains that entire ranking, as well as articles and long reads about all the most influential people, the power they hold, and how they wield their immense influence. We also discuss a variety of other topics, from the issues facing Starmer in the UK, to the rise of the new right in Europe, to if peace can really hold in Gaza. These are all topics we discuss in videos, but the reporting you'll find in Too Long is some of our best writing, with us able to spend longer on the stories than is ever possible on YouTube. If you're interested in checking it out and supporting the channel, then you can pre-order a copy right now at toolong.news. There you'll find two versions of the magazine, the standard and the premium editions. By buying the premium edition, you not only get the magazine, but you also get about 2 hours of exclusive content where the team debate and discuss their top 25 ranking, as well as reacting to the audience's vote for the very first time.
We could potentially have a monumental jump on our hands.
Yeah.
Hands up for leapfrogging into 6th.
The most powerful European country, the second biggest economy, the nuclear power that is... The nuclear power!
Yeah.
You'll also get regular access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, and get your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine. Whichever edition you want, head over to toolong.news to find out more. And if you subscribe to the magazine using code SUBSCRIBENOW, you'll be able to get a copy for as low as $4.99. Anyway, thanks for your support, because Too Long really does help to fund our journalism year-round.